Dadhood. Modern Dadhood podcast.
Hey, pal.
What's up, man?
Hey, pally.
Here's the thing. I feel like you and I have seen a lot of each other lately. However, not in this context.
Yeah, what's up with that?
I don't know, man.
Seems like the universe is trying to place us together for a purpose.
Perhaps.
I don't want to get too cosmic about it, but all I'm saying is we need to make modern dadhood a priority.
I do feel a little, I'll say this. I feel like I need it. You know, do you feel that? I feel like I've been missing something.
Yeah, this podcast is always a bit of therapy for me.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, why don't we introduce ourselves and then
Speaking
maybe we
of
can
which,
let the listeners know what we have been up to in podcast world.
My name is Mark Checkett, and I'm a dad to two boys who are twins, and they are 8 years old.
Well, my name's Adam Flaherty, and I'm a dad of two daughters who are 12 and 9. So like almost teenager. I don't really exactly know how to process that, if I'm being honest. But this is Modern Dadhood, an ongoing conversation about the joys, challenges, and general insanity of being a dad in this moment. And we'll talk fatherhood, and we'll talk how to process your kids getting older and what that means about you getting older. Yeah. But first, welcome to listeners. For those of you who have been with us for a long time, thanks for sticking with us through thick and thin and through several weeks in a row without new episodes. For new listeners, I think you're going to love this one. This is a great spot to drop in because our guest is Gestalt Therapist Vikram Kolmannskog. And Mark, why don't you tell listeners exactly what Gestalt therapy is? Because everybody's like, what is Gestalt therapy? So you tell them.
Oh, man. You know, here's how I like to explain it. What isn't Gestalt therapy?
Okay, good place to start. Why don't you get a little more detailed?
I'm going to do this from memory with no notes in front of me based on the conversation that we had with Vikram, which is now a week old. Here I go. It's a therapy.
Ding. Okay, got one
great,
bullet.
Good start. And it has something to do with connecting to the body, wherein you focus inward in the way you feel your emotions and the way that you feel experiences that you live through. And a lot of it is very aligned with the philosophy of like a Buddhist mindfulness practice. In fact, we talk about that because Vikram is practicing mindfulness like coach for people. And that's about as much as I remember of Gestalt therapy. Did I get any of it right?
Well, I don't know if I'm qualified to give that a ding or not, but I will say you use the word wherein, which I've noticed over the years of knowing you, that sometimes you drop that word in places and it makes you sound very credible and educated.
Well, shit, man.
So for that, I'm going to give you a ding.
Great.
And the truth is, Vikram will explain to us and our listeners exactly what Gestalt therapy is all about and how you can apply it to your fatherhood experience. Mark, before we get into that chat with Vikram Kolmannskog, do you feel like talking about the other podcast that we've been putting a lot of time into?
Are you referring to Death and with Victor M. Sweeney?
That's the one.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Well, we can also maybe talk a little bit about our adventure to Texas.
Yeah, let's start with that, actually.
Yeah, you and I went to Houston, Texas.
Tejas,
to a conference, which, by the way, I told to our mutual friend, whose name is also Adam McCallion, if you're listening, which you're not. Hello. And I said, hey, Adam and I went down to this we went down to Austin, and he goes, "Oh, cool. Like, you guys went to South by Southwest." And I was like, "Well, we went to this podcasting conference." I didn't even finish the word conference. And he audibly laughed at both of us and said, "That is such a dorky thing to do."
Yeah. I mean, it probably is, right?
it's sure.
I can own that.
Sure.
It's all.
But we had a great time, I would say.
We did.
And dare I say, we met some wonderful new and interesting people that perhaps will blossom into relationships as time goes on.
Absolutely. Podcast movement is always great for networking. All right.
Good times.
So Death and, for any listeners who may not be aware, Mark and I produce a podcast that's hosted by a former Modern Dadhood guest, a mortician named Victor M. Sweeney, who explores death and life with guests from all walks of life. And Victor is a very compelling, super funny, smart,
charismatic
young guy,
animated,
who is just enchants people. So highly recommend, if you have any kind of morbid curiosities, to check out Death and with Victor M. Sweeney, which we'll link to in the episode notes. And I kind of hate to blame that project for being part of the reason that we haven't had as many Modern Dadhood episodes lately, but it has been taking up a lot of time, and it's been gaining a lot of traction. But man, I'll tell you, I know we always say it, but I'm ready to make a renewed commitment to this. And we have guests lined up and episodes to edit. So I think we're right back on track.
I think so too. I think, well, in part, I think our trip to the conference in Austin maybe helped to sort of give us a little bit of that like renewed sense of like reinvigoration, an excitement towards creating some content.
So check out Death and. I also, if I may just take a quick moment to plug another podcast that I'm working on solo, Mark, if you don't mind. It's called This Headache Journey, and I am recounting the many different interventions and modalities that I've tried over the last 15 to 20 years as a way to reduce the frequency and intensity of my chronic daily headaches. And so if you know anybody who has chronic headaches or migraine, or if you do yourself, this is a resource that I wish that I had back then, because I've tried so many different things. I share my experience in each episode. I share my experience with a different intervention, and I interview a doctor about that. So you're getting the anecdotal story, but you're also getting the science of why that intervention has worked for many, many people who also suffer from chronic headaches or migraine. I think it's a very useful thing that could change a lot of people's lives. So check out This Headache Journey on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen. I'll also link to that in the episode notes. Well, what do you say we go ahead and play back that chat with Vikram Kolmannskog?
Vikram Kolmannskog.
Vikram Kolmannskog is a professor of Gestalt therapy at the Norwegian Gestalt Institute. He is also a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. He has one child, Leo, who's almost 4 years old, and he's about to release his new book, Reflections on Parenting from a Gestalt Therapist Father, Life with Leo. Vikram, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Adam. I'm really, excited to be here with you.
Well, when you first reached out, you opened your email with, and I'm going to quote this, you said, "I am a queer of color father myself, as well as a psychotherapy professor." And so Mark and I, we joke a lot because obviously Mark and I look a lot alike. And so we've always kind of made it a mission of the show to bring in fathers of all kinds to learn from their experiences and gain some new wisdom and just gain perspective that is different than what we experience as dads. And so needless to say, the hook of your email, it grabbed my attention because it sounds like your fatherhood experience is very unique, and just really glad to have you here. So we'd like to just start by asking our guests, what is fatherhood like for you in this moment? How's it going?
Oh, well, right now I'm really, really happy that we have co-parenting so that I'm also now he's with his mother. So that's part of our family structure and form so that I get a little bit of sleep and that
nice.
I can do some work, that I can talk to you. So I'm appreciating that part of our parenting setup. And then I'm also starting to miss him a little bit. So it'll be nice to see him again soon. Yeah, also a little bit back to what you said about maybe this particular kind of parenting that we are doing together, which might be different from some other forms of parenting and structures of families.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to start, since we've said the word a couple of times, can you kind of briefly describe what Gestalt therapy is, and maybe just like, when did you get into it, or what brought you to it?
Sure. Yeah. Maybe I can start with just what happened just before this recording, actually, because Adam, you asked me what my preferred pronouns are, something that I really appreciated. And I had a visceral reaction to that, actually. I could feel something happening in my body. And I think that awareness, is partly cultivated through my Gestalt therapy practice, my training and my practice, because that is really one of the main things, awareness of what is happening, here and now between us. So that's really key to Gestalt therapy, awareness and dialogue, like how we affect and are affected by others, and trying to increase that awareness. And to me, it's not just a kind of a clinical something that is just reserved for the clinical space, the therapy room. It really is a way of being and living and parenting, not least for me, this focus on awareness and dialogue. So I guess it fits really well, with my worldview and my values. So that's something that makes me feel very much at home in Gestalt therapy, the practice and the teaching and everything. So I've been teaching and practicing for close to 15 years maybe now. And it was actually first one of my very good friends. I always kind of liked our conversations and her way of being in the world. So again, outside of the therapy room, just our friendship and just her reflections and her responses. And then at some point, I kind of thought it might have something to do with her being also a Gestalt therapist. And I think it does. It's something about, like, it's a certain wisdom I feel cultivated. It's not about like just knowledge, but it's something about the wisdom that is cultivated through really getting to know yourself better and trying to be aware in the moment and having an intention to be in dialogue. So that was that was how I started. I was kind of inspired by a very good friend to study Gestalt therapy.
You talk a lot about mindfulness, and it from your descriptions of the therapy, plus the very little that admittedly that I've read about it, it seems that there's this, alignment between the idea of like mindfulness meditation and Gestalt therapy. Like, is that an accurate, I guess, if I'm sort of making an observation, is that an accurate observation to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think they fit really well together. Some people have called Gestalt therapy relational meditation, or kind of meditation or mindfulness in relationship, that it is really about that awareness, but it's about that awareness while we are together and what's happening between us and how we are affected and affect. So it's very, very close to mindfulness. And the founders drew a lot on, Zen and other existing traditions. And my form of Gestalt therapy is very, very informed by mindfulness.
In the title of the book, you identify as a Gestalt Therapist Father. And I would imagine that there's themes or strategies from Gestalt therapy that you apply to your parenting. And I wonder, like, if you can talk about what are some of the parenting strategies maybe that you find like most effective that you might borrow from what you're teaching there? Yeah.
So several things come to mind now, but one is the the emotional part of parenting, both how to meet your child's different emotions, not least the difficult emotions, but also to meet your own difficult emotions. As a parent, if you're exhausted and you're struggling with a toddler who doesn't want to change a diaper, for example, or whatever the situation is. I've found a lot of support in mindfulness and Gestalt therapy and the practices from those fields, including certain practices to kind of, stop up and recognize what's happening in myself and really allow that for a moment and also explore that, somatically and like, how does it feel if I'm getting like really frustrated, for example, that I take a moment, like hit the pause button and just take a moment to become more aware of what's going on so I can hopefully respond a little bit better as well with my son, rather than just being reactive a lot. And also, that's also modeling, I guess, with him. So it matters a lot how we are with our own difficult emotions. And then also with his, difficult emotions, I'll be very clear what it is. Like, okay, this is anger, this is sadness, it's allowed, and how does it feel? And while still setting, some boundaries, what's okay to do and not to do. And having said that, I think was a big learning for me. And I think maybe because I am a psychotherapist and a Gestalt therapist and mindfulness practitioner, and it's almost like I think all parents today try to live up to a very, high ideal of like how to be a good parent. And I think it was maybe even more so for me being, like, oh, I'm like a psychotherapist, I'm a mindfulness practitioner, I'm going to like put all this into practice now. I want to do a really good job. Maybe it also mattered, that I am queer of color. So I'm like, I'm going to really do a good job of parenting. Probably a lot of mechanisms in there. At some point, it was exhausting. I would lose my temper. I would try to be calm, do all this mindful witnessing of my own emotions and his emotions. But at certain points, I would also just explode or be really exhausted. And then I would feel so guilty. I would like really hit myself over the head. And then that's when I kind of noticed that I think these ideals are like, it's too much. It's becoming suffocating. And one of the founders in Gestalt therapy, he talked about that conflict between ideals and reality, that it can be quite a conflict there. And it's not always, how to find that fine balance. You may want to strive for something, but also what's the reality? You have to somehow at least take reality as the starting point. And one really helpful concept to me there was returning to, a classic in psychotherapy and psychoanalysis, Donald Winnicott's The Good Enough Parent. When I read some of his stuff, it felt like it was just like, I actually physically yielded more, into the sofa. I could like lean back and just like exhale a little bit and okay, good enough. That is the kind of parent that children need. That they need parents who also make mistakes. They need to show that, to see that life is messy and we can still, live with that mess. How do we live with that mess? How can there be, ruptures that we don't, meet each other that well, but still the relationship continues, the love continues. I mean, that's the preparation for the real world. It's great to become more aware of the emotions and to accept them and to, try to do all of that. But it's also really important, I think, to acknowledge the kind of the messiness of life and relationships. So that's also been a very important part of it for me, my parenting journey, and also, how I bring, the Gestalt and mindfulness perspective into my parenting.
I wonder, Leo's almost 4 now, you said. So can you think of any specific traits of his personality, which is obviously developing very rapidly at this age, that you can point to and say, oh, that's a direct reflection of the Gestalt principles that I've been, teaching or modeling to him?
Yeah, well, I mean, difficult to say direct and that is kind of evidence of it. But one thing I have seen, and which I'm really, really proud of, is how he deals with emotions. So he's very interested in emotions and he's not afraid of emotions. I think a lot of certain emotions in our cultures can be quite taboo, like, jealousy, anger, certain emotions. But I hope that I've contributed to this in him. And what happens is he can be with different emotions in himself and in others without being too afraid of it. So he'll ask me, for example, one day if I'm picking him up and I get a little bit, frustrated with him because he doesn't want to leave nursery or something's taking longer. And then he'll ask me in the car, are you angry now? And I'll say, yeah, I am a little bit angry now. And then he'll say, but soon you'll be happy. And I'm like, yeah, soon I'll be happy. But, I'm angry just now. And he'll be, okay. And then in a little while, he'll ask me, are you happy now? And I'm like, yeah, I'm happy again. And the same with, other grown-ups. It's really interesting. We went to a dinner party the other day. And the children, like Leo and the other children, were playing. And then it got a little bit loud or whatever. And the other father raised his voice slightly and, said something about it. And then after a while, Leo comes up to me and he asks me, was he angry? And the other dad immediately goes, no, I'm not angry. I wasn't angry, because it's such a taboo, right?
Sure.
But I'm just really happy that, he was angry and Leo can see that he's angry. And, I might not say it right there and then because it was so important for the other dad to not be angry.
Right.
But that is something that I think he does have, partly because of, this kind of a parenting, where all emotions are okay, and trying to be with different emotions.
I think that's fascinating. I think it's such I can speak just personally, like it's been a goal for me and my wife's name is Jamie. And for our 2 kids, I have 2 kids. I'm a dad of twins, who are just turned 8 years old. And it's always been sort of a bit of a goal of ours to be able to be raising kids who can talk about and understand the emotions that they're feeling, being like present enough that they can name them. And I just think that's so cool. That Leo's there, already at this point, and like inquisitive about it, and trying to understand the world around him. I think that's very cool. I wanted to go back like a sentence or two ago, because I'm just really interested in this. You mentioned as you become a father and you found yourself like in certain moments, like getting angry or exploding I just was curious to know that, like, was it something that you didn't anticipate would happen at all?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked that question, because I think anger is, I did say, I came with a general statement that I think anger is kind of a taboo in many cultures. Maybe something's changing in on the political level or certain spaces now, but I think generally in most of Western culture, anger is still kind of a taboo. And for me personally, it's been kind of something that I've had a very difficult relationship with, because of my own upbringing, etc. So I've tried to be a very calm person, and I was trying to be a very calm parent, right?
Yeah.
And I was trying to let Luke to let my son know that all feelings were okay, including anger in him. But at some point I realized, I'm actually judging anger in myself. That's what's happening here. I'm trying to be calm all the time, not get angry. And what often then happened was that I would explode. At some point I would just explode.
Yeah.
So then eventually it was really learning from him and being with him as well that, okay, how am I going to do this now? Let me start naming it earlier. Let me say I am irritated, I am angry, or I'm getting angry. And I would say it, while I would feel it in my body, like a rushing sensation or whatever, but I hadn't exploded yet, you know? So it was like I was able to then be with it with awareness. So that's something that has really happened for me personally, as a parent. I feel I've come closer to anger. That it's possible for me to say, now I'm getting irritated, now I'm angry, but there's some sense of awareness. So there is also then, I guess, some sense of calm or something together with that anger, which is really interesting, I think.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Yeah.
Vikram, you share in the book that you have got this alternative family structure, and you alluded to it at the beginning. There's actually 3 of you in the parenting relationship, and I'm wondering if you're open to sharing about this, sort of how the parenting dynamic works with 2 fathers and a mother.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's me, my husband Daniel, and our friend Cecilia. And we met Cecilia because we wanted to co-parent. So it was a very intentional thing. We wanted to have this family form, and structure. I think maybe I did say something about that, to be, at least as rested as we could be when we were with Leo, to have the extra energy and kind of pay attention to him, and then also to be able to have our lives, to work, to cultivate the relationship between me and Daniel, for example, to do other things. So it was a very intentional setup. And but of course, you don't know what it's going to be like until you're in the middle of it. So the beginning was quite bumpy. I mean, we bumped up against, some legal and institutional stuff that was just like, wow, it's a pretty heteronormative country we live in as well. We think, I think globally people have that view of Norway as a very progressive country. But for example, with when we wanted to go to get assisted reproductive assistance, I guess. IVF or whatever.
Sure.
The clinic was like, no, it's not allowed. If you're a straight couple, you can come. That's allowed. But Cecilia, as a single woman, would have couldn't choose to have, the sperm from me or Daniel. It would be a doctor who would find sperm from an anonymous donor for her. And the argument is to avoid designer babies, which is just like, it's a very strange thing. How is that avoiding designer babies, that the doctor finds the sperm instead of the woman? It's very... So it was quite a heteronormative setup. And then also when we went to see the midwife, she was like, no, only one more person is allowed in. It's +1. And Cecilia being, really very pregnant and quite vulnerable, I was so moved by that moment because she was like, my child has 2 dads. So yeah, we did get in. But it's kind of built into the system, it's quite heteronormative still. And then after giving birth, all 3 of us, we decided that we wanted to live together in the beginning to kind of, all of us cultivate the relationship with our son and also help each other out. But after a few weeks, Cecilia started feeling quite depressed and, was longing to be closer to her friends and her network in the city. All of that very understandable. But what it entailed was, her taking our son as well with her. So that was a huge kind of heartbreak for me, really. Yeah. And then I also was met with this invalidation, I think, of fathers in the system. So it was, the first letter that I was sent by the Norwegian Welfare and Labour Administration was a letter naming some of the rights and duties that you have as a father. It's kind of an automated standard letter.
Yeah.
But the only thing they actually mentioned as an example of the rights and duties you have as a father is to pay child support. So I was like, woof, that I was completely reduced to that really old-fashioned idea of what a dad is, right?
Very. Yeah.
So it was the first year, maybe the first 2 years, I would say, were really very, very difficult. But we did kind of commit to meeting in family therapy. We were very much supported by that. And we managed to kind of get through it, not least for our son's sake. And eventually, the time that he spends with us has been increasing. So since he was 2, he's been spending a week here and then a week with the mother. And now our relationship is much better. We also spend time together, all of us. I think it's difficult to foresee, what having a baby is going to be like for anybody, whether you're straight, queer, or whatever.
Absolutely.
But it did bring up a lot of stuff for us. And I think the institutional environment also wasn't always very supportive in that situation.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, now that you're getting to a point where there's this balance and it maybe more aligns with what you had hoped going into the relationship, how has the friendship evolved and how has the relationship been affected?
I would say that actually one thing that's been a really interesting part of the process was me writing this book, because, it's there are some ethical and relational dimensions to doing that, because I do write about our son, and I also then mention our relationships. Like I talk about Cecilia and Daniel, so they had to consent, of course, to me doing this. But what I also included as part of the process then was for Cecilia to read drafts of the book and to comment, and that, it became sort of a dialogue. So that became quite an interesting way to also process some of the stuff that we'd been through together. Yeah. I got some perspectives from her on what what it had been like for her that I also included in the book. And I think it made the book better. And, what also happened through that process was she is also a writer. So we kind of connected over that common, something that we knew when we met, that, we're both writers. That was one of the things we connected over. And that's kind of been something to increase the connection again, to work on that book together, or for her to be in dialogue with me about that. So now I feel that we're in a very, very different place. I'm very happy with where we are now. Yeah, and I'm really glad that, we can share the joys and the struggles of parenting together.
The book covers a lot of topics. I mean, there's topics like queer parenting, conflicting parenting, eco-parenting. And I'm just curious, was there a particular topic that maybe was most interesting to you to dig into and write about?
Well, I think I was really interested in these. And I mean, they also reflect something about me, I guess, that eco-parenting is also there, that to me, it is as important as, the emotional, like how to meet the different emotions is like, how do we relate to other than humans, and to include my child in that. And then I did think about, one theme that you didn't mention now, Mark, was playful parenting. And I really liked that, because there's something about the joyfulness and the playfulness as well. When we've been talking about the emotional part, and I mean, the queer parenting part is also full of joy, actually. It's, it's the struggles, but it's also some really beautiful, joyful moments, of our son, jumping around in a red dress, and I'm really glad that that's a possibility, to have that queer joy. But the playful parenting is really quite full of joy, and I really like that and I think that's maybe something, you asked me earlier, how did Gestalt therapy influence my parenting? And I would also really say that the parenting experiences, not least play and playfulness, has influenced my approach as a therapist. It's kind of made me more awake to these everyday moments, with our son, that I think I just need to get something printed, for work. And he starts dancing, and I'm like, oh, there is a rhythm, the printer is making some music. We can actually dance while I'm doing this. Yeah. And suddenly there's, I use Play-Doh with a supervisee, exploring a clinical case, because she notices that there's like Play-Doh in that space. And our son has been playing with the Play-Doh, and the supervisee says, I do really, long for more playfulness myself. And then when she brings up a case for us to explore, I suggest that, maybe we can explore it using Play-Doh, and something really interesting comes out of that, rather than, talking about it or analyzing in a intellectual way. Becoming playful together with it opens for other insights, I think. I would say that it's gone, really both ways. That the Gestalt therapy part has influenced me as a parent, but also some parenting experiences have really enriched my understanding and practice of Gestalt therapy.
It's funny, Adam and I were just recently came back from a trip to a very nerdy podcast conference that we went to. And, we were sitting on a bus next to each other for 5 hours. And we were talking about that. We were just talking about the idea of being a professional working person, just agnostic of like industry or thing or whatever, but being a professional working person, and also a dad, and how there is very much this propensity, I suppose, for not just bringing maybe the things that you learn or utilize or tactics in your professional life into your home life or into your parenting life to sort of maybe try a new way of talking with your kids or dealing with a problem or something that's happening, but that it can also happen the other way that you just described, which is kind of a wonderful and amazing, and can be, I think, like a really beautiful thing, because kids can just be so innocent and really direct and free, I guess, from, when you were talking about dancing to the music, to the rhythm of a, it's just such a free thing. Like, I'm sure I've sat at work and heard a rhythm and sort of felt it, but definitely ignored it because I'm busy. And it's like, how freeing would that be to just be able to, feel that and live with it and act on it, perhaps, I mean, I'm not really going anywhere other than to say it's just such an interesting thing. And Adam and I happen to just have this conversation about that, bringing those experiences back and forth.
It makes me think, Mark, of in Gestalt therapy, the one concept is polarity. Polarity is that all people and, all systems consist of like complementary forces. But what we very often do is we kind of cut out one side. It becomes something wrong. And especially as we grow up, we cut out one side because of culture and family, etc. So like I said, anger maybe is a shadow side or something that we need to split off. And the same with playfulness, that, as we grow up, we have to be serious, So the playfulness, the other part of the polarity is often like split off. And that's something that children can be. And in Gestalt therapy, I love like the founders of Gestalt therapy and how they viewed the human personality, that it may not be, really growing up at all, or maturing at all if we are splitting off some really vital aspects of ourselves. That growing up may be actually reintegrating some of the playfulness, some of the spontaneity to become fuller again. So to not move away from, being a child, but to rather, reintegrate some of those qualities as well is kind of an important part of Gestalt therapy work and play, I would say. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I'm curious, you mentioned, part of your process in just exploring fertilization options, this heteronormity that's kind of built into the infrastructure, I guess. And, here in America, I'll use the word unfortunately, things are pretty conflicted around marriage equality, around gender identity. What is the culture like in Norway around these things? And do you feel like you need to protect Leo? You're making a safe space for him to be free and explore and be open-minded. But as he grows up, potentially goes into public schools or places where he'll be surrounded by peers. And do you feel like Norway is a safe place for him to continue to explore these things as he grows? Or do you feel a sense, a need to protect him in some way?
Yeah, I really appreciate that reflection and that question. Feels very relevant in the world today. I mean, I would say Norway generally is a very safe country for, straight, queer, whatever. But it's still complicated. We do have backlash here as well, like with people reacting to pride flags in nurseries and some really absurd conspiracy theories like circulating and even, coming up. Like I've even heard it at, dinner parties with friends, like with friends of mine saying, oh, do you know what's now happening at the nurseries now? They're teaching the children to masturbate and an adult is helping them. And I'm just like, what? And then they referred to the National LGBTQ Association that this is what they are introducing in the nurseries. I'm just like, wow, these conspiracy theories kind of, so old fashioned, linking
so
gay or queer people to pedophilia. Like, I'm just like, wow. So it's definitely here. And we did have a terror attack on a gay pub the summer after Leo was born. Oh. So that was a very powerful moment. So I think it does affect us. And I feel what is important is to create, like, if the wider field is still quite heteronormative, I do hope that something else is spreading, although, there is back and forth. And I do hope something else is kind of, there is some queer contagion. I do hope that, hope for that. And, meanwhile, I think it's really important to create those smaller spaces like the home, at least at home, he can really explore different gender expression. For him, it's just very playful and fluid, it's again, this, we take things so seriously. For him, a purple hairband is just fun. You know, he'll put it on. He'll take it from my mother and put it on. And then because my mother has said earlier during the breakfast, you know, that she'll be a good girl or something jokingly, Leo starts saying, oh, now everybody's a girl here. You know, it's just something to play with. And I'm really happy that it's something we can play with together here. But I do wonder, you know, when quite soon, I think, children at nursery get influenced by their parents, and whatever their parents are doing will come out, you know, in nursery as well. So let's see. Let's see.
Yeah, there's certainly this like, I don't know if dichotomy is the right word, but that we want our kids to go out and experience the world, right? We want their eyes to be just opened, and we want them to learn new things and grow, you know, in every way imaginable, while at the same time kind of feeling this need a little bit to like protect from the things that the three of us definitely know are out there that can be, you know, at least on one end of the spectrum, like difficult to deal with, but on the other end of the spectrum, like terrifying, you know, dangerous. Yeah. And it's this constant, or at least for me, you know, this kind of push pull of, I want my kids to be prepared, but I also I just want them to be 8 years old forever and never learn some of the stuff that goes on in the world outside of the house. and you can't prevent that, obviously, but you can do the best you can to, I guess, prepare them and let them know that here with me, with, you know, our family and within the home, you know, and within certain communities, that there's always a space.
Yeah. And, you know, I do believe that is also part of my politics. You know, I think that's also political, like therapy is political, parenting is political. I think everything is political and social. So I do think these things have some ripple effects as well, that, teaching my son, you know, that, you know, it's okay if he wants to wear a dress. That will affect him and hopefully some other people around him at some point as well. But it's definitely messy, you know, when he then when I drive him to nursery and he's wearing the red dress, I do think, and I do start worrying, when is bullying going to start with regards to gender expression? When is he going to be bullied about stuff like this? Yeah. Again, it's the polarities. You know, we split off certain things. Like a boy is not supposed to be certain things. He's not supposed to be pretty or soft or cry. Like it's like we're making half a human, and I want him to be whole and to be able to choose and be playful.
Well, that's a really interesting way to think about it. Sorry, that just kind of hit me in a really like the polarity thing that you're mentioning, and saying that there could be these people out there that are just almost like half of a person because they just have never been allowed to, for instance, be in touch with certain parts of like their natural self.
Absolutely. And I think gender norms are really strong when it comes to that, the socializing us into becoming, you know, what a boy is supposed to be or what a girl is supposed to be. And then we split off the other half.
So Vikram, the book releases mid-April. Again, it's called Reflections on Parenting, from a Gestalt Therapist Father, Life with Leo. Where would you like to direct listeners to pre-order the book or to order it when it comes out?
The publisher has a page for the book, Routledge. So you can just, search for the book and you'll find the page, I think. Otherwise, you can also go to my website, which is quite easy. It's vikram.no. And then you'll find the book and everything else.
We'll be sure to include links to both of those in the episode notes. Vikram, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I hope the book does great. Yeah. It's so important to have this kind of representation out there for parents, and what a great conversation. I'm grateful to know you.
Thank you, Adam. I really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah. Likewise, Vikram.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever considered opening your marriage to a third person?
I was actually going to ask you this question. If you're asking me seriously, have I ever thought about a marriage and or parenting relationship that involves more people than just me and my wife? No. The question I was going to ask you was, if you hear the term co-parenting, I know that I've heard the term co-parenting before, but I had a different understanding of what it might mean. What about you? What do you feel like the term co-parenting means?
I think when I hear co-parenting, what I assume is that maybe a couple has separated and they have shared custody. So the child is growing up in two different households. Which
that's what I would have.
Which part of that is the case with Vikram.
Yeah.
It just so happens to be that there's a happy functioning couple in one of the households, and in the other, the parent who carried the baby, who actually we don't know if she is in a separate relationship or not.
Actually, I don't know that we know that. Yeah, unless he gets there in the book, unless he just explains in the book. Right, their relationship very intentionally involves an additional, at least from a traditional standpoint, an additional person in the relationship.
Right.
An additional adult parent person in the relationship. Right.
Which, I mean, some might consider that taboo, but I say if it works for their family, that's awesome.
You know, the taboo thing is really interesting, and I've been thinking about it ever since our discussion, because I will admit that when I first saw the note from him and was thinking about this episode, I thought, oh, that's a different thing. Like that's different, and that's unusual, or that's odd. You know, some combination of like those thoughts sort of went through my head. But then I started thinking to myself, well, like, don't we all sort of agree with the sentiment of like, it takes a village to raise the kids, you know? And I started thinking about that, and this is just a version of a village. Like, and there's no one version of the village, right? And if we all subscribe to that notion that really it takes more than the quote unquote traditional, perhaps, you know, family unit to really truly raise, you know, children, or do so in a way that's effective, successful, gives those kids a wide range of opportunities and perspectives to learn from and absorb and so on and so forth, then Vikram's relationship falls squarely into that.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree more.
Man, hey, listen, love spending time with you, dude. Great interview, great conversation, but honestly, we should probably wrap this up.
Let's get it done.
Okay. You can find Modern Dadhood anywhere you listen to podcasts, basically, which includes Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Pocket Casts.
You can also find a Modern Dadhood on Hark Audio, my listening platform of choice.
You're Hawk and Hark, huh?
Once again.
YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and also on the web at
moderndadhood.com, where you can find all of our episodes. You can search by topic or by guest. You can purchase yourself or a loved one a Modern Dadhood t-shirt or hoodie. You can even send us a message through the contact form on our website and tell us a topic that you would like to hear about or a guest that you think should be on the show. You can also just email us directly with that same information at hey@moderndadhood.com. Thank you as always to Casper Babypants and Spencer Albee for the music that's heard in this podcast. Thank you to our new friend Vikram Kolmannskog. And Mark, why don't you deliver the final thank you as you always do?
Thank you for listening.